Even though schools are closed, education is not. You are still learning and growing every day, and we want to help. The Tennessee Department of Education is thrilled to be able to offer a number of opportunities for learning at home. And we are so grateful for the partnership with PBS to bring you these lessons on television and online. I'm so deeply grateful for the outstanding teachers across the state who have developed these lessons especially for you. Tune in, keep growing, keep learning. You're doing a great job. Talk to you soon.
Hello, welcome to Tennessee's at-home learning series for literacy. Today's lesson is for all fifth graders out there. However, any children are welcome to join. This lesson is the fifth in our series. My name is Miss Thompson and I'm a fifth grade teacher at Tennessee Schools. I'm so excited to be your teacher for this lesson. Welcome to my virtual classroom. Today, we'll be learning about ecology again. Before we get started, to fully participate in our lesson, as always, you'll need just a few things. First, you'll need something to write with and a surface to write on. You might want a highlighter, a pen, a marker, or a crayon, something to just liven up your notes a bit. But if you don't want to use those, you don't have to. Let's begin. Let's talk really quickly about what we've been learning over the past few lessons. First of all, what is an ecosystem? Yes, you're right. It is a community of living organisms, including plants and animals, all interacting with one another in their physical environments. What is a habitat? I'm going to give you about 20 seconds. Think to yourself, what is a habitat? Got it? That's right. A habitat is a home within an ecosystem. Here's my next question for you. What are trophic levels? I'll ask it again. What are trophic levels? I'll give you about 10 seconds to think about that. Really strong thinking. It is connecting steps in a food chain. If you said that at home, great job. At least how many trophic levels exist in a food chain? How many trophic levels exist in a food chain? We talked about this on our last lesson. Does anybody remember? If you said 2, you got it right. Let's look at our image from our last lesson. In this illustration, which organism is a producer? Which organism is a producer? Yes, the berry bush. How does a producer get its food? How does this producer get its food? Yes, it makes its food through photosynthesis. In this illustration right here, which organisms are the consumers? Which organisms in this illustration are the consumers? Correct. The boar, mouse, and wolf. Next question. How does the consumer get its food? How does the consumer get its food? Yes, it eats plants and animals. In this illustration, which organisms are the decomposers? Which organisms are the decomposers in this illustration? You're doing great thinking at home. It's the worms, the snail, and the beetle. What is the role of a decomposer in a food chain? I'll ask it again. What is the role of a decomposer in a food chain? Yes, it breaks down dead plants and animals. Today, you'll be looking at different ways that we can organize information about feeding relationships in nature. When we have a lot of information on one topic, it is helpful to organize that information on paper in certain ways. There is more than one way we can organize information on paper. How might you organize information about the classification of animals? That's a great question. I'll ask it again. How might you organize information about the classification of animals? I was thinking chart. What were you thinking? I think a chart is a perfect way to do it. When the information is in a chart, you could see the possible patterns and differences among the various classifications of animals. What other ways might we organize information? What other ways have you learned about in your classroom to organize information? What about a KWL chart? Know, wonder, and learn. What about another chart called a T-chart? Venn diagrams, your food web, and your brainstorming links. All of those ways are good ways to organize information. What is one way that you have already seen the feeding relationships in ecosystems organize? I'll ask it again. What is the one way that we've talked about in previous lessons that we've seen the feeding relationships in ecosystems organized? That's it, a food chain. Remember at the end of our last lesson, you heard that you will learn more about food webs, which are overlapping food chains. You will see one additional way to organize information about the feeding relationships in ecosystem, and that's called an energy pyramid. The energy pyramid shows the trophic levels of feeding levels in a food chain. It also illustrates the amount of energy available to the different organisms. Be sure to grab your paper and pencil. I'm going to give you a couple of directions and I will repeat the directions 2 times. I'll repeat them twice. Number 1, draw a simple pyramid on chart paper or on a piece of paper that you have. Draw a simple pyramid on the piece of paper you have. Now, which part of the pyramid is the widest? The base or the top? So if you think about a pyramid, which part of the pyramid is the widest? Is it the base or the bottom? Or is it the top? Which is the widest? The base is the widest. I hope you got that correct. Producers, organisms that have the most energy are shown at the base of our pyramid. With sunshine and water, producers are able to make their own food, so they have the most energy available for themselves. We will hear about these 3 types of organizers today: energy pyramids, food chains, and food webs. All 3 of these things help us to understand and view patterns of feeding relationships within an ecosystem. Be sure to listen carefully to learn more about food chains, food webs, and energy pyramids. Before we get started though, I do want to give you a couple directions. Right now at the top of your paper, I would love for you to write down these 3 terms. Food web. Please write down food web. Next, I would like for you to write down food chain. Food chain. Next, please write down energy pyramid. Energy pyramid. I've asked you to write down 3 things: food web, food chain, and energy pyramid. I hope you did that at home. Beside each of those terms, sketch an early idea of what each of those might look like. So in your mind, just kind of sketch what you think those look like. I'll give you just a few seconds on that. I hope you got your sketches. Well, guys, did anyone find examples of food chains in your own habitat or ecosystem? Think about what you ate for dinner last night. Where did the food that gave you energy get its energy from? Where do you belong in the food chain? Remember that ecosystems include all living and non-living things in a particular community. All parts are interconnected. All living things in an ecosystem are essential and depend upon one another. And all non-living things, the soil, the climate, the amount of rainfall that an ecosystem receives, help determine what lives there. Today, we're going to look at food chains and food webs to see what they tell us about the eating relationships among different animals in different ecosystems. First, I want to explain an energy pyramid to you because I think it's a good way to view the trophic levels in a food chain. You already know that food chains cycle energy and nutrients through an ecosystem from one organism to another and back to the soil again. You already know that food chains have different trophic levels. Now think of these levels arranged in a pyramid. The bottom tier of the pyramid consists of plants. Notice that this trophic level is the wildest, showing that plants have the most energy available for the majority activity of life, growth. You know that green plants, the producers, get their energy from the sun. Omnivores and herbivores, plant consumers, make up the second tier, or trophic level. Notice that the second tier of the pyramid is narrower than the bottom level of producers. So if you notice, this is larger, and the more you move up, it gets smaller and smaller. That's because there are fewer organisms and less energy at this level. Most herbivores have to work very hard to get all the food energy that they need from plants. Moving about, staying warm, and reproduction, their activities for life, use up a lot of energy. Plus, less energy is stored in their bodies compared to the energy stored in plants. By the time carnivores enter the food chain at the third tier or trophic level, there is even less food energy available. Carnivores use a lot of energy for physical movement. Because there is less energy available and consumers use so much of it, the third tier of the pyramid is the smallest. This represents the least amount of energy of all the levels of the pyramid. The energy pyramid shows how much energy flows from one organism to another in a food chain. Because energy is lost as it is passed along in the food chain, there are fewer animals at the top of the pyramid. Those at the top of the pyramid may have to travel over large areas within an ecosystem to find enough food to survive. Think about that as we explore a variety of ecosystems. Let's look at the eating relationships and how energy is passed along in several different ecosystems. First, we'll travel to the Sonoran Desert in the southwestern part of the United States to visit a desert ecosystem. Even though the Sonoran Desert is one of the largest and hottest deserts in the Americas, it has plenty of plant and animal species than any other desert in the world. Each one of these species has its own habitat within the ecosystem, but we will look at the ecosystem as a whole. Thinking about that desert, let's look at the energy pyramid that would make up what we see in that desert. What do you see in this image? Take a look there. What do you see in the image? Yes, there is an energy pyramid. The main producers in this ecosystems are shrubs and cacti. You see the main producers down here at the bottom or the base of the pyramid. The plant consumers, both herbivores and omnivores, include ground squirrels, rabbits, kangaroo rats, mice, lizards, desert tortoises, and birds. Those are right there above the producers. Moving up in the tier, you have carnivores that include kit foxes, elf owls, red-tailed hawks, roadrunners, scorpions, coyotes, badgers, raccoons, skunks, and rattlesnakes. Though they do not live in the driest part of the desert. Mountain lions are often come down from surrounding mountain areas to hunt. Where they exist, mountain lions are at the top of the food chain. Vultures and beetles are some of the scavengers of the desert. Remains left to rot by the scavengers become food for the decomposers, mushrooms and insects and microorganisms. With so many diverse plant and animal life, there are many food chains in the Sonoran Desert. Let's look at two simple examples here. Ants eat desert plants. Next, the scorpion eats the ants. Then the rat eats the scorpion. Then the hawk eats the rat. Finally, beetles and fungi break down the hawk when it dies, returning nutrients to desert plants. Ants eat desert plants. Next, the scorpion eats the plants. Then the bird eats the scorpion. Then the fox eats the bird. Finally, beetles and fungi break down the fox when it dies, returning nutrients to the desert plants. Remember that the decomposers like this beetle and fungi play an important role in the food chain. They break down dead animals and plants into nutrients, and those nutrients are released into the soil. Do you see any connections between these two food chains? Right. Both food chains begin with ants feeding on plants. And in both food chains, a scorpion eats the ants. When the food chains connect, as they surely do, food webs are created. Here is what one possible desert food web may look like. Remember, our last food web illustration on our last lesson had lots and lots of arrows, and it looked a bit confusing. The coyote rat eats desert plants. Next, the snake eats the kangaroo rat. Then the coyote eats the snake. The lizard eats desert plants. Next, the snake eats the lizard. Then the roadrunner eats the snake. Then the hawk eats the roadrunner. The tortoise eats the desert plants. Then the fox eats the tortoise. The lizard eats desert plants. Then the hawk eats the lizard. The lizard eats plants. Next, the roadrunner eats the lizard. Then the bobcat eats the roadrunner. The ant eats desert plants. Then the scorpion eats the ant. Then the rat eats the scorpion. Then the hawk eats the rat. The ant eats desert plants. Next, the scorpion eats the ant. Then the bird eats the scorpion. Then the fox eats the birds. Finally, scavengers and decomposers eat the dead coyote, hawk, tortoise, roadrunner, or anything else, returning nutrients to the soil. Can you identify the producers in each link? Yes. Remember, producers produce their own food, and the producers in the desert are the plants with their seeds, nectar, and fruit. And who are the decomposers? If you said beetles and termites, you're right. And there are also the bacteria and fungi that produce carbon dioxide and water, returning nutrients to the ground to nourish the producers. Let's move from the dry desert to a very, very different ecosystem, one that is far from being dry. Can you guess which ecosystem I'm thinking about? Really good guess. Let's take a peek at the Florida Everglades, the biggest freshwater marsh in North America. What do you see in this image? Yes, I see an energy pyramid too. Low-lying aquatic plants are the producers in this giant wetland ecosystem. And remember, producers are usually at the base of our energy pyramid. What consumers do you think live in the marsh? In other words, who eats the reeds, cattails, and water lilies that live there? I love all the thinking that's happening. Representatives from each of the 5 groups of vertebrate animals live here. Amphibians, mammals, birds, fish, and reptile all live in the marshlands. We'll take a look at some of those hungry eaters who consume water plants and see who then feasts on them. Here are some examples of food chains in a wetland. Tadpoles eat plants. Next, the turtle eats the tadpole. Then the alligator eats the turtle. Finally, the decomposers break down the alligator, returning nutrients back to the soil for the producers. The grasshopper eats plants. Then the alligator eats the frog. Finally, decomposers break down the alligator, returning nutrients to the soil for new producers. Just as there are many food webs in the desert, there are also many food webs in the marsh. Remember, the plant producers are at the bottom of the food chain and food webs. Not all of the consumers eat the plants, but the web of connection always returns to the producers. A food web in the marsh might look something like this. Tadpoles eat plants. Next, the turtle eats the tadpoles. Then the alligator eats the turtle. The grasshopper eats plants. Next, the frog eats the grasshopper. Then the alligator eats the frog. The grasshopper eats plants. Next, the frog eats the grasshopper. Then the raccoon eats the frog. The grasshopper eats plants. Next, the crawfish eats the grasshopper. Then the snake eats the crawfish. Then the raccoon eats the snake. Insects eat plants. Next, the frog eats the insects. Then the snake eats the frog. Then the hawk eats the snake. Insects eat plants. Next, the fish eat the insects. Then the egret eats the fish. Then the alligator eats the egret. Finally, bacteria, earthworms, insects, and other decomposers eat the animals and plants when they die and return nutrients to the soil for new producers. Before I leave you today, we'll look at one more ecosystem. This one lies along the equator in South America. Who can make an educated guess as to what ecosystem supplies energy for monkeys and jaguars? Yep, it's the Amazon rainforest. You can see the thick canopy or layer of top branches of trees that covers the rainforest and provides home to many animals. What do you see in this image? You got it. It's another energy pyramid. And remember, our producers always are at the base of the energy pyramid. I've already named a few of animals in the Amazon rainforest. Look at the pyramid with all the different plants and animals. How many producers, consumers, and decomposers can you identify? Remember that an ecosystem's diversity of plant and animal life is what helps make it strong. On the bottom row, you can see the producers: tree trunk, banana plant, orchards, and grasses. On the next two rows, there are consumers: frog, monkey, toucan, crocodile, hawk, and eagle. And at the top of the energy pyramid right here, that's the jaguar. On the sides, there are decomposers: bacteria, earthworms, fungi, termite, and beetle. Where do the plants at the bottom of the chart get their energy? Yes, the producers in the first trophic level get their energy from the sun. And who might eat the plants? Yes, the ant. And who might get energy from dining on that ant? You're right, probably the baby crocodile or the frog. Who then may eat the baby crocodile or frog? Maybe a snake. Then the bodies of the snake become food for the decomposers. Look at all of these plants and animals in the Amazon rainforest. How many different combinations can you find to make a food web? There's lots of combinations we could find. Yes, the monkey would eat the berries, then the jaguar eats the monkey. The monkey eats berries, next the baby crocodile eats the monkey, then the snake eats the crocodile. The monkey eats berries, then the hawk eats the monkey. The ant eats plants. Next, the frog eats the ant. Then the ocelot eats the frog. Then the snake eats the ocelot. The capybara eats plants. Then the jaguar eats the capybara. The capybara eats plants. Then the snake eats the capybara. The capybara eats plants. Then the hawk eats the capybara. Finally, decomposers eat the remains of the dead animals and plants and return nutrients to the soil for the producers. Every ecosystem in the world is made up of interconnected living things that are dependent on one another for survival. The food chains and food webs of the Sonoran Desert, the Everglades, and the Amazon rainforest provide examples of the interdependence of organisms within each ecosystem. The ongoing regular completion of this energy cycle in food chains determines an ecosystem's ability to survive. The next time we're together, we will look at ways in which ecosystems change over time. Let's return to the 3 terms that we talked about in the very beginning of our lesson that I asked you to write down on your piece of paper. Remember, they were food chain, food web, and energy pyramid. What can you add to your notes to help you better understand the similarities and differences in these informational graphics? I'll ask it again. What can you add to your notes to help you better understand the similarities and differences in these informational graphics? Now, you will create a food web based on the energy pyramid. Remember to label the producers, consumers, and decomposers shown. Then, you will sequence one of your food chains of at least 3 trophic levels. Remember, you're going to label the producers, consumers, and decomposers shown. Then you will sequence one of your food chains of at least 3 trophic levels. After you've completed one food chain, you should complete another food chain to see if the chains overlap to create a food web. I'll say that again. After you've completed one food chain, you should complete another food chain to see how the chains overlap to create a food web. And if you have any extra time today, you might want to illustrate your food webs. We'll talk more about food chains and food webs next time. As always, boys and girls, I have loved learning about ecology with you in this lesson today. Thank you for inviting me into your home. I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson for Tennessee's at-home learning series. Bye.
Hello, I'm Maria Lee, First Lady of Tennessee, and I'm so glad you're here. This has been an unprecedented time for our state and our country. I'm so proud to see how Tennesseans are coming together to serve and lift each other up in the midst of challenges. Each of us has a role to play, including you, our students. Right now, your school buildings may be closed, but there are many opportunities to keep learning. And we are so grateful for the partnership of PBS in bringing this program directly to you as one more way to keep us learning and growing together during this time. I want to also give a special thank you to all of the teachers who helped make this possible. We could not do it without them. Most of all, thank you for joining us.